We're talking this morning about the Code of Ethical Political Conduct that was drafted just before the general elections back then. And now it's come up again, and you're reminding the candidates, you're reminding the political parties of that Code of Ethics, which they signed and which they need to basically stick with. Tell us more about this, and I suppose it would hold the same general elections as it would hold for local government elections as well.
Definitely, it holds the same. The code holds for all elections in Trinidad and Tobago, and the conduct and the behavior of the political parties, their leaders, their candidates, and even their supporters. And what the code calls for is simply to try to get people to acknowledge that we live in a democracy. We have to respect each other's rights. We have to respect each other's positions. But that does not mean, and in so doing, we must do so in a civilized manner. We must focus on issues rather than on people, rather than on personalities, rather on mauvais langue, as we would have had it in Trinidad in the past. And basically, so all we're saying is simply we're trying to uplift the level of our politics so that we could be proud of it.
Now, these comments, or your remembrance, or your bringing this back to the political parties, actually came on the heels of the shooting. There was a shooting of Rupla Rampasad, the driver, and the campaigning with the PNM and Chaguanas on Friday. And then there were also reports of death threats made to the PNM St. James West candidate, Roald Ramkisoon, and both incidents are actually being investigated by police. Now, that is what actually made you bring back up this call for responsible campaigning. I think one of the things that really people are talking about these days is the roti. And I think that is one of the things where we're thinking, is this really responsible campaigning? There's so many other issues that need to be discussed. Then there was the unfortunate statement as well by Fitzgerald Hines on the platform, where he was basically saying to kill the UNC dead, and statements such as these.
Well, let me just back up a bit. The release by the code by the council this weekend was not based on the fact that these recent statements were made. It was something that the council had met. The council has met continuously, even since the last election, regularly. And what we did is simply said that we needed to remind the population, as well as the political parties, of the code. Unfortunately, these incidents that you refer to came up during the course of the week, and there's always a lapse between when we send out a release and when it actually gets published or so. So it was coincidental that it came on the same day as the news reports came. But unfortunately, we were not looking at that. We were simply trying to remind the population that these are things that they should be reminded of. In terms of the campaign thus far, we are not in a position to tell people what campaign about. If I wear my other hat as head of the Department of Political Science at UWI, I would tell them, well, look, if we campaign about local government, let us campaign about local government issues. Let us not make this into a general election campaign. Let us not make this into a referendum. Let us make this where we could find the best representatives who will serve the needs of the community and not necessarily even the political party or the country as a whole, but rather the community for which the electoral district for which they are being selected. Unfortunately, that is not our politics, and that is one of the things why the code became important, because the code was simply telling people, let us focus on issues rather than on personalities. Let us focus on development. Let us focus on the country. So those are the kinds of concerns that I would have as a political scientist. As chairman of the council, I cannot tell parties what to campaign upon. What I would remind them, however, is simply that they need to focus on what the election is supposed to be about. When we hear, for instance, the UNC campaigning that this should be a sort of a referendum on the government, it raised a question. So what about the person who lives in a small community in Brasso or in Ecclesville? Should they really be concerned about whether this is a referendum or not, or should they be concerned about getting their garbage collected and their drains cleaned and their cemeteries cleaned and so forth? And those are the kinds of things that we need to focus on in a local government campaign.
So
likewise,
go ahead.
Likewise, when you said that the PNM now is, Dr. Rowley is using this campaign, and we could say that the PNM is using the campaign to simply say, well, look, let's just talk about all the ills of the past government. While that is not something that the code abhors or so, and in fact the code says that you could talk about those things. The fact is, where do we go from here? And that, I think, is where our politics needs to focus on.
So how do we get the candidates then to basically follow the code of ethics? How do we keep them accountable to stick to the code of ethics? Is it strictly on the onus on the candidate, or is it also our responsibility as well to ensure that they do that?
Well, this is the concern that we really should have. The code, as you would probably know, has been drafted or was drafted by civil society organizations. Yes, the parties have signed on it, but we have no legitimate or legal backing. All we have is moral suasion. But all we have is moral suasion as a council to remind the parties on what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Where the onus really lies is on the candidates, the parties, the candidates, as well as the citizenry at large, who should bring to book anybody who breaches the code. Because this is what they're going to have to tell people. If you have signed on, or your party have signed on to a particular code and mode of doing things, and you are breaching that now, what guarantees are there that the manifesto promises that you are making, that you are going to accept them, or are you going to breach them in the same way that you're going to breach the code? And those are some of the issues that the citizenry will really have to do. I want to emphasize that when I say we, the Council for Responsible Political Behaviour, do not have the capacity to monitor every election meeting or to hear what everybody is saying. In fact, our monitoring is really what is published in the media. And from that extent, if citizens, for instance, feel that they need to complain, yes, we will receive their complaints and we will make a statement on their complaints. But the point about it is that the onus is really on the citizenry at large to say, let us bring and raise the level of our politics.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because the council is actually encouraging members of the public to basically report any such breaches of the code that they may observe. So they can report that to you, but then when it is reported, what then? What happens after that, after it's reported? What sort of action will be taken after it's reported?
Like I said, all we depend is on moral suasion. But the point about it, and in fact, I could tell you for a fact that in the run-up to the general elections, we had complaints from the population at large about issues and statements and happenings in all the various campaigns, and in many instances, when we got those complaints, we should also remember that on the council sit representatives of 5 political parties: the PNM, the COP, the UNC, the NSG, and the ILP. And their representatives take back the concerns back to their political directorate. And in fact, we have had instances where politicians, while the political leaders may not, and the parties may not readily admit it, but we have seen that based on complaints and based on our representation, political leaders have literally chastised their own candidates and their supporters and raised the level of the politics. We have had politicians themselves who have written to us and complained about other politicians. And so clearly the message has gotten outside there. We we don't have any legal backing, but we know that the political parties are listening. When we brought issues to the political parties, they dealt with it. And that is, I think, is as far as we could go.